Merry Christmas Eve and welcome to the Immaculate Inoculation. So this is our Fungi Friday number 28, I believe. And I've got this whole setup in front of the flow hood here. So if you guys could give me just a thumbs up if the audio is coming in. I tried to turn down our positive pressure, try and keep the noise down, but if you could give us a thumbs up if you can hear us. All right, testing the audio. All right, anyway. As other people start to join in, I'll kind of just describe the workflow that I have set up. All right, so someone gave us a thumbs up. I hope you can hear us coming in. All right. If not, you can just watch, and then I'll add in audio later on. But all right, people are giving us a thumbs up, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So if you can't see, I've got about 10 or 12 different mushroom strains here, some sterile water. I've got a sterile syringe that I just autoclave. So if you don't have sterilization pouches, you could always just use foil, but it's just a 20 ml syringe, and I'm going to use this glass syringe to inoculate all the different petri dishes. So I'll start off just by hydrating the spores, and that's one of the main reasons why I really like using the petri dishes to do my spore prints. So you can see we've got a matsutake, a wild matsutake. So I've got a lot of ponderosa pine at my new property, and I'm going to be injecting matsutake directly into a liquid culture and then growing that out and expanding it for the spring, because I want to do some inoculations, liquid inoculations in huge volumes on my new property. So for that, I've got my matsutake, and I've also got two different phenotypes of Stropharia rugosa annulata, or the garden giants. So I'm going to be doing those directly into a liquid culture as well. And then I've got some Cordyceps spore prints that I took a while back, and I wanted to test the viability of these ascospores going directly into a liquid culture. So those were taken sterile, aseptic, in vitro, and then the matsutake, I kind of lifted that above using Vaseline in a jar. So this is a really clean spore print. And then the King Stropharia, these are both from the wild or from outdoors, so they're going to be a little bit dirty. So I'm going to do a small cereal dilution, dilute these spore prints out, and then inoculate those directly into a liquid culture, which we use organic honey. So shout out to Bjorn Honey. They filter their honey, so it's super clear. I've been using this for about 4 years now, and I love it for our liquid culture. So shout out to Bjorn's. I think that they sell them online now, so you can check out Bjorn's honey. And this is the local clover blossom, so just their generic honey, but works really well for liquid culture. All right, and then after we do the spores directly into liquid culture, I'm going to be doing spore solutions onto sterile conical tubes, and then I'm going to show you guys my trick for speeding up the germination. So there's a product called Polysorbate 20, also known as Tween 20, and essentially it's a surfactant. So that is like a soap. It's a non-polar surfactant, so it doesn't have a charge, it's neutral, but what it does is it binds to the outside of the spore, so it prevents spores from clumping together. So I'm going to do half of my spore streaks without tween, and then half of them with the Polysorbate 20 or the tween 20, just so we can see the difference in the time. It's supposed to speed up germination, so that means the time that you inoculate it onto the petri dish until you start to see mycelium. It speeds up the time and it prevents different spores from clumping together, so we'll be able to get more separate colonies. And in order to do that, I'm going to be using a lot of these plate spreaders. These are sterile plate spreaders. You can also use a sterile inoculation loop, but to save time, I'm just going to be using the plastic ones today. I know I don't really like using these plastic ones, but they're sterile, so I know that they're going to be contamination free. So another thing I'm going to do is a spore swab from some of these glass spore prints that I had from a few years back. So I've got a king oyster. I really liked the coloring on this cap, so I'm going to mix this king oyster, and then I've also got a few different enoki strains that I'm going to be pulling spores off this wild enoki. So this is from Colorado, and then I've got a generic commercial enoki that I got from the store, and then I took spore prints. So we're going to be mixing and matching different phenotypes together, and then plating them on petri dishes, so that next week I can go through those dishes and show you guys the progress from how you inoculate spores to selecting healthy mycelium. So, all right, welcome everyone. I'll go through the chat at the end, but I'm just gonna try to crush through this as fast as possible. It's Christmas Eve, so Merry Christmas to everyone. I know my wife, she's waiting for me up there, so I'm gonna try to go through this as fast as I can and just explain the process along the way. So the first step is I'm just going to hydrate all the spores. So they've been sitting in these petri dishes for almost a year, some of them. So it's a really good idea to just hydrate them with sterilized water. I've got my media extractor, so I ran this through the pressure cooker earlier today, and it looks like it's cooled down to room temp, 74 degrees. So that's the perfect temperature for hydrating my spores. So I'll just go ahead. I really like this glass syringe. I got it from Lion's Mane, and you can just reuse this over and over as long as it's sterile, and you can sterilize it in the pressure cooker. So that's about 18 mils there. And I'll start with these wild mushrooms first. So I'm just gonna go through, and all I'm doing is hydrating these spores in solution. So I really like using the petri dishes for this reason. It creates a perfect vessel to put the water in for hydrating, and it looks like the seal on my media extractor is a little bit loose, but I'll just keep using it. Alright, so typically I'll let these hydrate for about 15 minutes before I start inoculating. I found that that really helps the spores to germinate pretty quickly. So that is the Cordyceps. We've got Shiitake, and then also the garden giant, or the Stropharia rugosa annulata. And one of these is from Walla Walla, Washington, so West Coast, and the other one I got from, it was from Mushroom Mountain, so I believe they said it was from North Carolina. So we've got a West Coast and East Coast that we're going to combine together. And then we're also going to do the Matsutake directly into a liquid culture and mix the two king garden giants and then the Cordyceps as well. All right, so I'll do that first just to clear up some space on the table here. And I forgot to get paper towels, so I'll just grab those really quickly. All right, guys. Oh, sorry about that mess. All right. So I will open up a sterile syringe here, and then I like to use the 14 gauge needles. So I'm going to use this to aliquot my maitake, or matsutake I mean, and basically I'll just take it, aspirate it, and you can see some spores that are floating around here, and then I'll inoculate these directly into my liquid culture. So this is going spore hydration into liquid culture, and then I'm going to QC this in a couple days from now, and hopefully it's a clean spore print, and then we can expand this culture into a larger vessel, and then I'll be using sprayers to inoculate this on my new property. So matsutake can grow on ponderosa pine here in Colorado. So I'm super excited to try and get that culture going. It could take multiple years of inoculation before we see any mushrooms, but I'm all into experimentation, and if I don't try, then I won't be able to find out for sure. So this is kind of experimental, but that's what the YouTube channel's about. All right, so I'll throw this up on my magnetic stir, and I'll just set these cultures off to the side so I can open up some workspace. All right, so now this is my Cordyceps. So sterile Cordyceps in solution, and for this one I'm going to mix the two different phenotypes together. So the easiest way to do that is just take your syringe, kind of lay it against the surface, and hopefully some of those spores make their way off the surface of that into the syringe, and I can see some spores floating around in there. And then I'll go ahead, aspirate the air, and then pull So these were two different phenotypes that I grew in vitro, and they're diluted at about 5 mils each from the spore print. And then this will be my multi-spore solution. For my Cordyceps. So one of the risks going directly into a liquid culture is that this is going to be a prime vessel for contaminants. So you have to quality control this before you move on to the next step. but I'll just call this Cordyceps. It's going to be my MMX5. I do have some strains that I'm about to inoculate for production on our Etsy. So visit our Etsy shop, Fresh Fungi, if you want the most recent Cordyceps. But this one has really strong breeding genetics. So I've fruited those other ones out and then took spore prints, and now I'm putting it into this. So this is third generation from the wild. Alright, so there's our Cordyceps. You could see a bunch of spores floating around. So we've got our wild Matsutake, our Cordyceps, and now these King Stropharia, which they came from outdoors, so they're probably a little bit more dirty than the other strain. So what I'm going to do is dilute that using these sterile conical tubes. And the idea is that if there's any bacteria or mold contamination, by diluting it a couple standard deviations, then we should be able to separate those spores out enough where they might be dispersed away from the contamination, so when I inject it into the liquid culture, it won't contaminate. So in order to do that, I'm going to do my media extractor again. And then I've got my sterile conical tube. Alright, so that was 25 mils. So then I'm going to take 10 mils and 10 mils, and then that will give us the 45, which is the maximum amount. So that's a little bit past 1 to 10 dilution. That should be enough to get a clean culture started. But if not, if you have a dirtier culture, you can always dilute these 2 or 3 more times, and then you should have a clean solution to inoculate your liquid culture. But I'm gonna, trust my best practices, and I'll dilute it with 25 mils and then 10 and 10. And one of the tricks that I do, if the spores are kind of stuck to the petri dish, I'll just take a sterile swab and kind of move it around, and that way, I'm not sure if you can. All right, so right now I'm taking the spores and I'm kind of lifting them off into solution using a sterile swab. So that's just a little bit of a pro tip there. Now that those spores are floating around in that petri dish, I'll take my sterile syringe, and then I'm going to take up 10 mils and this phenotype is from Washington State, so I'll throw in my 10 mils in there, and then I'll take the solution with the King Stropharia from the East Coast, and I'll mix that together. So you can see the spores kind of floating around in solution there. So I'll just take this on the vortexer. Really mix up those spores. And then going to go directly into a liquid culture. And then I'm just going to take a spore syringe and then I could store this in my refrigerator if I want to repeat this procedure. I'll have my King Stropharia spores, and today is Christmas Eve. All right, and then I'll just put that there. All right, so then I'll label this guy. Okay. So that right there is probably the fastest method that you can go from spore to mycelium to finished mushroom. So if I wanted to, I could let those spores germinate for about 48 to 72 hours, put them into grain spawn, and then hopefully I would get a fast growing mycelium from all those spores that I just collected. Probably take about 2 to 3 weeks, and then I can inoculate an outdoor bed. But I'm going to grow these out in very large vessels. I've got 3-liter containers, and then I'm going to dilute that into 5-gallon buckets and then do a bunch of spray inoculations in the springtime. So I'm not in a hurry, but I just wanted to show you guys probably the fastest way that you can breed mushrooms. So I coined that hyper breeding. I don't know if there's a more technical term, but you can check out my video, Hyper Breeding on Cordyceps, and it walks through the entire process, but it's not really that hard after you inoculate your liquid culture. Alright guys, so now that we opened up the sterile tubes, I'm going to start the real experiment here. So I should probably start by hydrating the spores again. So while those are hydrating, then I will aliquot out my Polysorbate 20, which is a surfactant. And then I will go on to doing my plates. So I'm running 2 different medias here. There's potato dextrose, which is the lighter color, and then malt extract, which is the darker color. And I just want to kind of select for the fastest growing mycelium. So that's my goal of this whole project, is to get really fast, high yielding strains. So I'll just move on to hydrating spores. And if anyone has any questions so far, I can try to answer questions on the fly, but if not, I'll go through at the end and do as many as I can before I have to go up and eat dinner. Alright, so I'm just doing 20 mils of sterile water into these different petri dishes. So the first one is a Shiitake spore print that I took. It was just off commercial strain, not sure what kind. And then I'm doing a Namiko or Foliota Namiko. And there's 2 different phenotypes of that. So now I'm going to be doing a local Colorado oyster. So it was a summer oyster, high temperature variety. All right, then I've got my lion's mane. So this was a lion's mane from Niagara Falls, New York, and then I took a spore print and I'm hydrating with some sterile water. All right, so then got my brown oyster, also known as a Phoenix oyster. It's another really good summer variety. Now I've got some blue oyster cultures that I'm going to mix. So I'm just taking 2 separate spore prints from different mushroom cultures. Some of them are wild, some of them are commercial strains, and basically what that's doing is it's increasing the gene pool, so there's going to be a wider variety of genetics. And I've tried to mix and match different species in the past, and I haven't gotten any really good results, but there is a paper out there that uses snake venom, and this is the portion where you would add the snake venom is while you're hydrating the spores or in the actual media, and that kind of breaks down that cell wall to cause more mutations, and hopefully by doing that it allows for more rare anomalies to occur. I haven't tried that yet, but it's definitely something that I want to try in the future. Okay guys, so we've got our spore prints hydrating, and you can see it's basically just sterile water, and then it's gathering those spores from the surface. This is a Shiitake spore print. So someone's saying to fix the camera. Don't really know. It might be sideways. All right. Continuing forward. So the Polysorbate 20, it's pretty viscous. So I just put it into this syringe here, and I'm going to aliquot that into these tubes before I add the spores, just so I can do 1 syringe per spore solution, and then do 1 tube without the tween, and then 1 tube with the tween, and then I'm going to plate them out on separate media so that we can tell, does this really cause faster germination times? Is it going to spread out the spores? It's all theory, and I guess there are already scientific papers out there, but I just wanted to do it myself just so I could show you guys. So this right here is the tween 20. It's this. I like to get the it's cosmetic grade, but you can get laboratory grade too. It's just make sure that it's sterile. And then I'm just going to be adding a couple drops to 10 of these. You even want 1 drop, just 1 drop. That is plenty right there. So 1 drop of tween per conical tube, and then I've got 10 different cultures that I'm going to work with, so I'm just going to do 10 tubes with tween and then 10 without. So once again, for everyone coming in late, the Polysorbate 20 is a surfactant, so that's like it's like a soap, so it's a non-polar surfactant, so it's not going to gather dust or debris. And what it does is it binds to the cell walls of the spores, and that is going to prevent clumping, and it will also create a better surface or a better surface connection to the agar, so it should germinate the spores faster than normal. Alright, so, and then I was doing 20 mil aliquots in the spore solutions. So then for the ones that just have one petri dish, I'm going to take 10 mils, put it in there, and then 10 mils in one of the syringes without the tween. And then I'm going to vortex that to mix up the spores, and then I'm going to put a drop on one of the MEA plates, a drop on the PDA plate, and then use a cell spreader to spread out those spores. And then in a week from now, I'll go back and select the healthy mycelium, and hopefully we don't get too much contamination. Normally I do this in my vertical flow hood, but it's easier to show it in front of this flow hood. And yeah, I think it's a little quieter too, so you guys can hear me better. And then I do have a couple other spore prints that are on these glass slides or tin foil, so I'll show you how I like to gather those off, but I'll save that for the end. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes, and I think these shiitakes are hydrated pretty well. So I'll start off just by syringe, and then I'm going to pull up 10 mils. Or I guess as close to 10 mils as I can get. And you can see all the spores in there. Alright, and then that is going to go into my Polysorbate solution, so you can see the bubbles starting to form there. And then I'll take my 10 mils and then I will go into just a sterile conical tube that does not have the tween in it. Alright, and then first I'm going to vortex this for about 2 seconds, really mix it up, and then I'll go back into the syringe, and I just need a couple drops. So the inside will be without the tween, and then the outsides will be with the tween. So then I'll just take my drop, go a couple drops of spore solution, and I'm going to use the same syringe because this has almost the same solution, but with the tween, I just went from the sterile solution first, and now I'll be going into my tween. I hope that makes sense. I should have vortexed it, but instead I just kind of mixed it with the syringe. But then I'll go Alright, so go through that really quickly. So this is shiitake without tween, and this is shiitake plus the tween. This is shiitake plus tween. This is shiitake without it, and then shiitake plus the tween. And I'll go through after you guys are gone and parafilm all these. I don't really want to do that right now, but I have these plate spreaders, and I'm going to spread out the shiitake with tween. I should use a different spreader, and then I could do the same spreader for the MEA. So these are 2 shiitakes with the tween. So I'll set these off to the side. And then I'm gonna see if I could re-sterilize these. And then this is the shiitake without the tween. So basically I'm just spreading those spores out to try and get good isolated colonies. So there's 4 plates of different shiitake inoculated on Christmas Eve. And then this was the King Stropharia. All right. So now, that was the shiitake plate. Now I'm going to move on to lion's mane. So lion's mane has been one of the more challenging mushrooms to breed because inside the teeth is a really good spot for bacteria and yeast and mold to collect and gather. So it's been pretty tough to get a clean print, but I did do a video on my new technique for raising up the lion's mane and then having that create the spore print. So the spore print had like a bunch of different screen hash marks, and that's because I raised it above the dish to let the spores drop on there, and hopefully it created a cleaner spore print this time. Okay, so now I'm going to take 10 mils from the lion's mane and I can see some of these spores coming right off the dish, and then I'm going to do the 10 mils into the tween, and then this time I'm just going to vortex it right away so I don't forget. Alright, then I'll go my 10 mils. And definitely wasn't 10 mils, but it'll work. And then I'll vortex that. Alright, and then just going to do a couple drops. So no tween, no tween. Back into solution. And then this has the tween in it. Alright, so then I'm going lion's mane, lion's mane, tween solution. And you can't go back and re-sterilize the syringes. You just got to be careful with the rubber stoppers. But now I'll use my plate spreader for the outside ones, which had the tween. And then my inside dishes, which is just going to be just regular spore solution. Okay, so now I'm going to label. So lion's mane, and then this is lion's mane plus tween, lion's mane plus tween, All right, so then we've got 4 dishes of lion's mane. And then we've got our lion's mane spore print. And then our 2 lion's mane plus tween. And then lion's mane spores. All right, so starting to get a little bit more workspace here, but you can tell that I like to maximize my workspace. All right, so I'll go through, see if there's any comments I can answer. All right. All right, so sorry for the camera angle, but we're gonna have to move on from that because I don't have time to fix that. All right, but I hope you guys get the gist of what's happening. So basically, I'm hydrating my spores with sterile water. I'm aliquoting them into a centrifuge tube or a conical tube. Then I'm vortexing them. Half of them have Polysorbate 20, which is a surfactant. Half of them don't. And then I'm inoculating them and spreading them on agar so that a week from now I can go through and select the healthiest mycelium, transfer them onto fresh agar. So what if you don't do your spore prints into petri dishes? What you can do is use a swab like what I have here, and you can swab it directly onto a petri dish. So that's one method, but it can be pretty dicey because sometimes these spores get too dry. But you can see right there, I've got a decent amount of enoki on here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of rub that in a straight line, and I'll do that and then I'll go through, and there's a separate phenotype here. And then you could just rotate that to the other side so you're getting a fresh part of the swab. And then you can just crisscross that same pattern. So that way we're getting 2 different phenotypes of enoki on the same dish. So that is a really simple way to do it, but you could end up with a lot of contamination if you don't have clean spore print. So an alternative to that would be to just hydrating it. So what you could do is, here, I'll show you. So you're gonna want a fresh tube and aliquot it with some sterile water. So dispense 20 mils in here, and you can even do 40 mils. But then, this is where the vortexer kind of comes in handy. Is I like to just take the sterile swab, you can dampen it a little bit with water so you're getting a better grip on the spores. And then so the spores were transferred from this sterile piece of glass to a sterile spore, and then I'll just vortex it into solution, and then I could just take those spores and streak them on the plate. So those were the inoki, so I'll go one below. And that way, those king oyster spores will kind of be spread out on the dish, and by hydrating them like that, they should germinate a little bit faster than those dried inoki spores. So this is just inoki streak. And then once again, these lighter plates are potato dextrose, and then the darker plates are malt extract agar. So I'm just running two different agar types. And then this is going to be the king oyster. And my workspace is clearing out a little bit more. All right. So that's kind of the gist of it. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Give us a thumbs up. Check out our Etsy page. I'll have these up as a liquid culture as soon as I QC them and grow them out. Hopefully March, April, just in time for the farmer's market. So this is one of my favorite ways to breed mushrooms. I just started working with the Tween 20. And I think that, you know, it's going to save at least a few days. So even if just by sharing this knowledge, it shaves off a couple days on everyone's breeding projects, I think it's well worth it. It's like $4 for that bottle on Amazon, and you can check out our affiliate page. One more thing I wanted to do was to hydrate our freeze-dried agar samples. So this right here is a Piapino culture that I freeze dried, and I rehydrated about a month after. So I freeze dried these in April, and then I inoculated, or I just rehydrated them in a month after. So, and then this is a Cordyceps. So I have a bunch of these vials saved from my freeze drying cryopreservation video, and it's been about 8 months now. You can see these agar samples are just, you know, really dry. They look healthy white, but if you didn't do this, you wouldn't be able to tell that there was no moisture in there. But I'm going to add some water, let them incubate for about a week, and see if we get some clean growth, because that would be a very low energy way to preserve the mycelium. And it worked after a month. It kind of dropped off after 2 months, and now this is 8 months, so I've only got one of each left. But if even one of these starts to grow mycelium, then I'm going to revisit that and try and figure out what I did wrong. But anyway, these were freeze dried in April, stored at room temperature, and I'm just going to inoculate about 10 mils of sterile water back into these tubes and just let them incubate here for about a week to see if we get any growth. All right, I'm really excited about the Cordyceps because that one survived for 2 months, and if there's a way to freeze dry the Cordyceps mycelium, then that is going to really be beneficial long term because those ones tend to senesce pretty quickly. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that video. Give us a thumbs up. Check out our other YouTube videos. I'll follow up with this in a week or so, and I'm going to go through the rest of our phenotypes here and inoculate them onto some agar, and then I just parafilm them, put them in the incubator at 72 degrees for about 7 to 10 days, and we should start seeing some germination happening. So Merry Christmas to everyone. Hey, sorry about the angle. I don't know why my phone won't adjust, because on my screen it looks like it's working well. I'll have to figure that out, but I'm just doing this YouTube on my own, and I'm hoping that, you know, this knowledge can reach you guys so that you can grow tons of different phenotypes, and that way we're preserving the genetics for the long term. So I think one of the most important aspects is mixing different mushrooms from different areas, and that's going to enhance the gene pool. As this industry evolves, it's going to be important to continually breed and just create the strongest genetics possible. All right, guys, I hope everyone has happy holiday. I'll see you guys in 2022, and until next time, much love.